Hey folks, welcome to the rooftop. Trevor here. It's December. It's about 47 degrees outside. Actually a pretty good temperature out here for a brew day. It's about 47 degrees. I actually hadn't planned on brewing anymore in December, January, but unfortunately the latest IPA that I did got some oxidation in it, I think during transfer. So I'm going to have to dump that beer. So I've really been enjoying some of the darker beers that I have on tap right now. So I decided I'm going to replace that IPA with a robust porter. So that's what we're going to be brewing today, so stick around. So I did my water calculations in Brewing water as usual, and for the balanced brown was the profile that I used. And what this calls for based on my water is 3.2 grams of gypsum and 1.8 grams of Epsom salt, and then finally 1.8 milliliters of lactic acid. Alright, so let me go over the grain bill with you really quickly. Now this recipe I borrowed from Brew Your Own's website. It's an article that Jamil Zainashev wrote several years ago. I've never brewed this particular recipe before, so I thought I'd give it a try. It looks like a pretty good robust porter recipe. I am making a couple of changes. For his base malt, he uses pale malt. I'm using Maris Otter, very similar, but more British pale malt. I also am scaling this up to 10 gallons instead of the 5 gallons, and I'm adding a 15% increase on each one of my grains to make up for my inefficiency on the mash in a bag. Or brewed a bag. The other thing I'm doing is I'm going to switch out this yeast. So he recommends the Y yeast 1056, which is a real neutral yeast. I'm going to use the Y yeast 1318 London L3. I find that it's a little slightly fruitier estery yeast, so I want just a little bit of that character, but not a lot. So I'm going to use that as the yeast for this beer. So the grain bill that I'm using, I'm doing 24.5 pounds of Maris Otter. I'm using 3 pounds of Munich. I'm using 2 pounds of Crystal 40, 1.5 pounds of chocolate malt, and 1 pound of black pap. Okay, we are at strike tip. We're gonna get our bag set here. And it smells so good. Bag number 2. Alright, so we've got our target mash temp 153. Grains brought the temp down just a little bit, but it's moving back up there pretty quick. So got a recirculation kettle going there, keeping that warm, holding the temp. Dropping back in here to the mash. So I'm going to cover this up, let this go for an hour, and we'll get the boil going. Alright, so we've been mashing for a little over an hour now. Had a tough time with how cold it is out here, keeping that temp at 153. I think what I'm probably going to do in the future is maybe get something to insulate one or both of the kettles to help maintain that temperature. But regardless, we got pretty close to maintaining that temp at about 151 the whole time. So I'm going to go ahead and raise the grain bag and get this thing dripping, and we'll get the boil going. Alright, so we got it pulled up, we're draining. I wanted to just show you something, a little trick I figured out. You know, this rack can only go so high, and this bag at full volume, I can't pull this bag out of the wort. So what I do is I actually pump the wort, you know, because I've got the second kettle, it allows me to move the wort over here, and then I can pull the bag up above the liquid level, and then let that drain a bit, and then move on from there. So just a nice, helpful tip if you've got a two kettle system like this. Alright, so we're going for an English porter here, so we're using English hops. So I went in and got a bag of East Kent Goldings. I'm going to be doing 3 ounces of this at 60 minutes. And then at 15 minutes, I'm going to be doing an ounce of Fuggles along with some Irish moss and yeast nutrient. And then I'm going to come back at flame out and do 1.5 ounces of the East Kent Goldings. Alright, we just started boiling, so it's time to add our 3 ounces of East Kent Goldings. Alright, we're at 15 minutes. And our ounce of Fuggles. 2 tablespoons of yeast nutrient. And, sorry, teaspoons. And then 2 teaspoons of Irish moss. Alright, so I just cut the gas. So we're going to add the last addition of EKG, 1.5 ounces. And then I've got my rainwater over there as usual. What I'm going to do is I'm going to recirculate the water out of the kettle, or sorry, the wort out of the kettle through the plate chiller for a little while until I get maybe 5 to 10 gallons of rainwater up here that's warmed. I'm going to use that to clean everything after I get everything pulled off. So after I've collected some of that rainwater here to cool off the kettle a little bit, then I'm going to start running that off into my fermenters. Okay, so got the robust porter in the fermenter with the Yeast 1318. I pitched that right around 68 degrees, and I've got the refrigerator on at 64 is what I'm aiming for. So got the other one over here at 64 as well. So we're going to let these go. You know, usually this yeast and at this temperature, I wouldn't be surprised if these are done in 5 or 6 days. I usually let them sit a couple days after that. I've got the tilt hydrometer in that fermenter there, so it'll let me know when I've hit final gravity, and then I'll let them sit a couple days, and then we'll get them kegged up. Alright, thought we'd wrap this up with a quick tasting video. So, started off with the original gravity on this beer of 1053. I was really going for 1060 or better because I wanted this beer to be around a 6 to 6.5% beer. Even though I made the adjustment, a 15% addition on all of my grain bill for each one of the grains, still didn't get the original gravity that I was looking for. This is something I'm finding consistently a problem with this new mash in a bag 10-gallon system that I have. And I could obviously keep increasing the grains, but it makes that bag get even bigger and heavier, so that's obviously a problem. I think probably what I'm going to have to do is just finally bite the bullet and get a grain mill. What's happening is essentially my local homebrew store's got a pretty wide gap on their grain mill, so it's just not getting pulverized enough for me to get good extraction or get enough extraction to make up for the inefficiencies in the mash in a bag setup. So that's probably what I have to do to fix that. So fermented this beer about 6 days. Finished out at 10:15, so that came to an original ABV of about 5%, a little over 5%. Again, I was shooting for 6.5. We know why we missed that. You know, because this was replacing a beer that I'd gotten some oxidation in, I was very careful with my transfer. So I'll walk you through that briefly. So what I did was I took a keg, took 2 kegs, sanitized them of course, and then filled them with CO2, about 30 psi to make sure they sealed. And then I, with the pressure relief valve, released the pressure and then let it fill back up, and did that 4 times, which should reduce most of the oxygen that's in that keg. I also try to be very careful with moving those fermenters around when I was doing the gravity feeding into the keg. As far as transfer goes, I didn't want to take the lid off to let the CO2 out, so I took a liquid ball valve connector, and I connected a hose on one end, the other end I connected to the fermenter, the spigot, and then I let that drain down into the keg. I put a ball valve for the gas out on the other side so the gas could leave the keg. You could also do the same thing with just the pressure relief valve and just hold that open and let it go. So by doing that, I basically dramatically reduce the potential oxidation or exposure to oxygen that the beer could have had. So that seems to have solved the problem. There's no oxidation that I can perceive in this beer, so I was very excited about that. Some other things here, it looks pretty clear even though it's an opaque, dark beer. I think the clarity is good there. I didn't do any gelatin fining with this. This is just Irish moss and cold crashing that's making it look that way. So I think that's good. It does have kind of an off-white head to it, although not a lot of head there. As far as the aroma goes, when I smell this beer, I'm definitely getting the maltiness on it. And quite a bit of a little syrupiness to it. Maybe just a little bit of roastiness. When I taste it, I'm getting some chocolatey notes and some caramel notes to it, and a little bit of that earthiness that I was expecting to get from the hops, the Fuggle and the East Cape Goldings. It's a little thinner. I would actually like it to have a little bit more mouthfeel to it, but it does finish dry, which is nice, which is what I was going for. It does kind of have a little syrupy thing going on too, but overall I think a really nice beer. I've enjoyed sipping on that one quite a bit, and definitely will brew that one again. As always, thanks for watching the video. Go ahead and hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Also subscribe if you want to see more of my videos as they come out. And of course you can catch all the recipes and all the videos and everything at welcometotherooftop.com.